into custody. The sheriff's office says the shooting occurred on the campgrounds adjacent to the concert stages. Organizers described the location as an overflow camping area. I'm Julie Walker.
Heat advisories have been issued across much of the southern U.S., triggering thunderstorms that knocked out power to more than 500,000 people in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And Americans across the country are observing the relatively new Juneteenth federal holiday with festivals, parades, cookouts, and other gatherings. This is AP News. The Flash debuts as the box office leader this weekend. AP Entertainment correspondent Margie Zaraletta reports.
I completely broke the universe.
A lot of anticipated movies came out this weekend, and The Flash proved to be the biggest draw. It opened with $55 million in North American theaters, according to studio estimates. The Pixar animated film Elemental opened in second with $29.5 million. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse finishes third in its third weekend of release. Transformers Rise of the Beast.
Santita?
Or The Little...
I just tried calling Reverend Wilson twice for the Facebook test for the show, and I couldn't get an answer.
Medicaid in the past couple of months as
I'll try again in a few minutes.
To halt healthcare coverage following the end of the coronavirus pandemic. Most got dropped for not filling out paperwork. According to information obtained by the Associated Press, about 1.5 million people have been removed from Medicaid in the more than 24 states that started the process in April or May. I'm Mike Hempen, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Vuchitsky. Skies will become mostly sunnier for today with a high into the mid-80s. Winds out of the east around 5 to 10 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, mostly clear, low near 62. By Tuesday, sunshine high of 87 degrees. Wednesday, plenty of blue skies and sun. We'll see high around 87. Thursday, mostly sunny, high around 84 degrees. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 66.
Research shows people ignore radio ads. While I want you to remember that Liberty Mutual customizes and saves you hundreds on home insurance, I know no one's listening, so I can say anything. I can even tell Jenny that I never stop thinking about us. Sometimes I almost call, but I only truly feel safe revealing this in the privacy of my nationally broadcast radio ad.
Only pay for what you need at LibertyMutual.com. Savings may vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
This is a WCPT 820 Heartland Signal News Minute.
This is a very sad, very significant, and yet not surprising moment in American history.
That's Pennsylvania Congresswoman Madeleine Dean speaking on MSNBC hours after the federal indictment against Donald Trump was unsealed.
It's not surprising that this former president, who has shown such a proclivity for corruption and grift, is now indicted federally. This is a man who has spent a lifetime working around grievance and grift. Everything he has done is perfect. Remember that. I've never heard anybody say that other than a child, and actually even children get that that's not true. And so I feel very sad for our country. We need to go through this. Mr. Trump needs to be held accountable to the rule of law, but our country is hurting.
For WCPT 820 and Heartland Signal, I'm Andy Miles.
I always had to be so good, no one could ignore me. Carve my path with data and drive. But some people only see who I am on paper. The paper ceiling, the limitations from degree screens to stereotypes that are holding back over 70 million stars. Workers skilled through alternative routes rather than a bachelor's degree. It's time for skills to speak for themselves. Find resources for breaking through barriers at tearthepaperceiling.org. Brought to you by Opportunity at Work and the Ad Council.
Hi, everybody. Chicago's progressive talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Okay, is everything off? Hello? Are we still there? Devin?
Industry grows.
Okay.
Companies owned by
Devin?
white men tend to.
Yeah, I had to run to the other room, get the station back on.
No worries. I was
Resources,
just
longer
concerned that
histories
we
of
were
wealth,
off. Okay.
and
I was concerned too, so I had to run and check.
industries and take up market share.
Erica is president of Equity Workforce Development at the Solar Energy Industries Association.
All right, we're going live in 60 seconds.
Okay,
To make sure that as the demand for solar grows, history does not.
No, and I'll try again once we start the show, and I'll let you know when I get her.
Okay.
To take advantage of the wealth building opportunities of this industry is super important.
So to promote diversity in the industry, SIA created a free online database of companies working in solar that are owned by women, veterans, and minorities, including Black and Brown people and members of LGBTQ+ communities. The database makes it easier to find and hire these companies. And Simmons Group provides businesses in the database with information about networking and other opportunities.
We have an unprecedented opportunity to welcome more diverse voices into the industry.
So the transition to clean energy can also be part of a transition to a more equitable economy.
10 seconds.
Climate Connections is produced by the Yale Center for Environmental Communication. To hear more stories like this, visit climateconnections.org.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
More and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to call me today on this Juneteenth holiday and let me know what you think about the holiday. This is a day in 1865 when African Americans in Galveston, Texas, found out that they had been freed from slavery. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation had been issued 2.5 years before. Some enslaved people knew that they had been freed, but most did not. In fact, the slave holders did not tell them that they had been freed, so they were working for 2.5 years without knowing officially from their slave masters and from citizens of Galveston that they were in fact free. And then they had other problems once they found out that they in fact had been emancipated. Life for Blacks in Galveston was very hard. As they would walk down the street, white people would harass them and would come up to them and ask them, who owned you? Their freedom was never acknowledged. So I want to hear from you. What do you think about that? What do you think about this holiday? And why is it that we have been able to fully embrace Juneteenth, but we don't really talk about the Emancipation Proclamation? And then there is also a movement afoot to remove that exception for slavery from the 13th Amendment, which granted African Americans our freedom. That is to say, you're free until you go back to prison. Congresswoman Nikema Williams and Senator Cory Booker are looking to eliminate that exception. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT, and I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I want you to meet Laura Bell and Paula Garcini Zipser and Monique and Barbara Bacon out there in Oak Park, and Jan and Dave Dowling and Ty from Atlanta. And Natasha, how you doing? Sending you all so much love. I'm so glad that you're joining me and all this whole family on this morning, because it is a consequential morning. It is a federal holiday. What is open, what will not be open? Most things are not open today. Most federal offices, they're not open today. And so I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you think about this holiday? Do you think it's a holiday that we need? Will you be acknowledging it? Will you celebrate it? Will you be having a barbecue? Will you use it to celebrate
educate, illuminate. I mean, because think about it. It took 2.5 years. We're celebrating a moment in which celebrating the dishonor of the white citizens of Galveston, of Texas. They would not tell people who had been held in bondage that they were free. So we are celebrating that today. It's kind of interesting. And so I want to know what your thoughts are. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let me know what your thoughts are about Juneteenth. Let me know about what you think about this being a national holiday. Let me know how you plan to look at it today. So please call me at 773-763-9278. It is a beautiful, beautiful summery day here in Chicago and in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Can you believe that the summer is here already? Well, yeah, it is here. It is already here. And in Chicago, we're going to have a high of 78 degrees. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, we are going to have, it's going to be pretty much the same. It's beautiful in this part of the country. But the question is, how long will it hold? I don't know, because it's going to be partly cloudy. It's going to be warmer in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 91 degrees. And so call me at 773-763-9278. I want to know what your thoughts are about Juneteenth on this day. Let's get to some of the headlines. Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State, is meeting in China, but he's meeting with the president of China as we speak. What will be the result of this conversation? Indeed, of these conversations that he's having with his peer, the Secretary of State, as he meets with the president of China. Indeed, it has been said that relations between China and the United States are the lowest they've been since we resumed diplomatic relations in 1979. What does that mean? And indeed, how will these two superpowers coexist? According to the McKinsey Company, last year, China became the largest economy on earth. Maybe not the most powerful, but people don't expect that to last for long. Indeed, de-dollarization is a very real thing. So what will be the deliverables? What will be the deliverables in this meeting? And we've had more than 300 mass shootings as of this weekend. We crossed the Rubicon, 310 mass shootings, more days than there are in the year, including one in Willowbrook, Illinois, in which one person was killed, more than 20 people injured. Let's pray for them. And then there was a gentleman who was targeting police. Who does that? What is going on? Is it guns? Is it us? Is it both? Dedicating the show to Daniel Ellsberg today, everybody, the whistleblower whose actions, whose absconding of the Pentagon Papers helped us to see the injustices that were being done to the Vietnamese people in the name of the American people. He was harassed in real time. Absolutely. President Nixon had someone go into his psychiatrist's office to get information on him, personal information, to blackmail him, but he held strong and became one of the world's leading peace activists of the last century. He made his transition, having made the announcement just a few months ago that he had inoperable and terminal cancer. But we thank God for Daniel Ellsberg, who made his transition. We thank God for him today, and we dedicate the show to him. And those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-WCPT. Let's pull up Dr. Shanina Knighton so that we can talk with her today. But let me give you some of the good news, just very briefly. When we look at Juneteenth, we look at the end, we look at, well, an end point in this freedom struggle in the United States for all of us. Indeed, we have to be grateful to our ancestors, many of whom knew that they had been freed from slavery. But the people of Galveston would not let them be treated as free persons. And really, literally, guns were at their temples, were at their heads. They could not behave as free people. because they would have been killed. They endured that insult. They endured that assault upon their rights and liberties. And guess what? We're here today because of them. All of us, red, yellow, black, brown, and white, precious in God's sight and pleasant and accounted for, because these men, women, and children refuse to let go of the goal of freedom. Mahalia Jackson sang a song some time ago that how I got over. My soul looks back and wonder how I got over. Well, this is how we got over. When you want to look at what is happening in America today and why we have so much tension, you must look at the indigenous people and the land that was stolen from them. You must look at this horrific institution of slavery, racialized in the United States of America, not racialized all over the world, but racialized here. And what Black women endured, not having agency over their bodies, Black people not allowed to create families, not allowed to marry, not allowed to raise their own children. They had to raise the children of others. Black women raped, having to have children as their beloved husbands or would-be husbands looked on, having the children of the slave masters. All of these things happened. Men, Black men being raped in the middle of the plantations. Oh, we must tell the story because all of that happened. Raped to break them as men so that women would not respect them and their children wouldn't respect them either. That's the system of slavery. That's the true story. That's the story that Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and many of us don't even want to tell because it's so painful. But it's a story nonetheless. We must tell the story. And yet something in this human spirit refuses to die. Something in us kept on surviving and thriving. And as much pain as we are in today, because I believe pain settles in the DNA, everybody. I heard a song yesterday by the great gospel psalmist John P. Key, There Is a Lily in the Valley. And it sounded like the songs that my great-grandmother and grandmother used to hear in their churches, sung in the Watts hymn named a cappella. And you could hear our enslaved ancestors singing the song in that style. And I almost couldn't get through the Keep Hope Alive show. I just started crying and I had to come off of camera because I just thought about all that we've endured. Hey, Ari, down in Venezuela, down in Brazil, all of us who've been brought into the Caribbean, when you see African people in this part of the world, we were brought here on the transatlantic European colonial project. And so the good news about Juneteenth is that we did get over. The good news about Juneteenth is that we're still getting over. The good news about America is that we're getting better. It takes time. Yes, it does. But we are getting better. When people say that we have not made any progress, that's not true. Formally, we are not a segregated society anymore, although in practice we still are. Formally, these rules discriminating against us, well, prohibiting those discriminations, well, those are on the books, although we do still indeed deal with discrimination. And on it goes. But it is our responsibility to pick up the baton in this generation and continue to move it forward as our foreparents did before us. So, today, in a very special way, I dedicate this show not only to Daniel Ellsberg, but to our ancestors. Whether you're red, yellow, black, brown, or white, these people, these Black people, they're your ancestors. Whether your family held slaves or not, they are your ancestors. You are that is part of the American project. And we all bought in. You're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. If your foreparents decided to come to America, the land of opportunity, Black people created that. Immigrants added to the American project. But this American project was constructed physically and spiritually by Black people. We've taught you about freedom because we had to fight for it. We built the White House and the Supreme Court and on and on and on, not for free, but unpaid labor, on top of land that belonged to none of us, that belonged to indigenous people. Yes, the good news today is that we are still here. We are thriving. We are surviving. And we're doing it together. God bless you, everybody. God bless you. God bless you. Juneteenth, what do you think of the holiday? What do you think about a holiday that we are celebrating in which Black people did not find out officially that they were freed until the Union Army came in 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been written? What do you think about that? Do we celebrate this or do we illuminate it? Do we educate about it? I mean, what do we do? How do we do this today? Is it just enough to have some barbecue and whatnot today? Hope you'll do much more than that. Hey, Ari, how you doing, sweetie? Oh, you love your Afro-Americans. Thank you so much, and I am that. All right, everybody, let's get right to it. We've got Dr. Shanina Knighton, Juneteenth, sending you so much love today. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Santita. How are you?
Oh, girl, I'm doing well as I'm thinking about the ancestors today. And so I want to know, what are your thoughts? I mean, because, a lot of people are going to be barbecuing. I know I continue to ask you about the proper way to do things, but you know what? Sometimes I go to, to buffets, not even buffets, but to a dinner, where they come out and they bring you like these benefit dinners where they just bring you food. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I can eat that. And I have a very, very sensitive stomach, because of the surgery that I've had. The biliopancreatic bypass. But I just want to know, what are your thoughts today? Because it's the holiday time.
Yeah, so, to your point, definitely people will be partaking in food and they'll be fellowshipping. I just wanted to actually bring up, Santita, I actually had an interesting experience the other day at a celebration, and it was a novel idea that they ended up having, like, let's say, food trucks opposed to, like, serving food. However, one of the things that, and I'm actually going to end up posting about it, was the condiments. So the condiments was over in a plastic bin, and when I picked up my hot sauce, I went to go open up the hot sauce to be able to put it on my food, and I didn't even make it that far because it had dirt and mold on the actual packaging of the hot sauce.
Whoa, wait a minute, what?
Exactly. And so I'm just telling people, I know I've brought this up plenty of times before, about making sure that condiments are not placed directly on your food, because someone may not be paying attention to the fact that a pack of ketchup bursts or some hot sauce bursts in the container, and those contaminants are on your packets. And when you go to take those packets and someone puts it directly on your food, those are the things that could potentially make you sick. And so it's very important, I know I've said it before, but ask that those things are not placed directly on your food. When someone has to, let's say, give you a fork that is unwrapped, their hands have to touch that fork. When they have to hand you the condiments, those items are also unwrapped as well. And so if they're putting them directly on your food, whatever contaminants that they have that was on their hands is now being directly placed on your food. And so it's very important that people are aware of the fact that they should not be having items placed directly there. So I was turned off by that. I did not end up putting the hot sauce on my food because I had cleaned my hands. And so I had to get it out. Like, I didn't put it on the food, but I just set it to the side and just be done away with it. And it was just still the whole fact. Imagine had somebody set that directly on my food.
But it makes me question everything else, when I see that.
It does. And not only just that, it's one of those things that's commonly ignored. And I see it happen at big food chains as well. So when I've actually been out to larger restaurants, and I've asked, have gotten food to go, they still will, let's say, put cream cheese and other items directly touching my food. And at that time, it becomes a big nuisance because I'll ask ahead of time for them to not put it in my food. And sometimes they still do the same thing. Even how I mentioned to people when they're going to go get French fries, I said, stop having them stick those ketchup packets directly on your food that's going to go on your face, because you don't know what box it was laying in. Somebody's hands had to touch it, and that very well could be the thing to make or break between you being sick and you being well. And so, again, bringing that up, because as we are out fellowshipping, and we're sharing condiments, we're sharing food, and we're sharing other things, really think about, is it the food that's making me sick, or is it the handling of the food and potentially the condiments that are making me sick?
So if you go to a picnic today, how should the food be served? Should one or two persons be serving the food with gloves? Should the food be covered? I mean, I know you don't want to go to a family celebration or to a friend's party and, be Debbie Downer and you don't want to make a big deal of it, but it is a big deal. I mean, what do you do?
Well, the first thing is making sure that there's even hand hygiene materials. So whether that is somewhere to wash hands, and that's being encouraged, or if there's hand sanitizer. To me, without those two things being first, like just hand washing or somewhere to clean hands, that is like rule number one. There has to be something that is available for the sanitizing of hands. So I always have that as one of the most important things that has to be present. Then, secondly, afterwards, it does make you wonder, how is the food sitting out? Is it covered? Is it uncovered? Is it at waist height? Are people able to hover over it? That does make a huge difference in regards to whether or not I think food is going to be safe. If it's being talked over and the spoons is laying down over in the macaroni opposed to there being a plate for it to be sat on, I have to tell people, as soon as that spoon falls down in the food, we've now taken all of the contaminants from somebody's hands, and it's now laying over in the food because somebody didn't get the spoon back out. So it sounds simple, but paying attention to those little things are very important.
Okay, I got to go in less than a minute. How did you see the mold? I mean, what how did...
It wasn't hard to miss, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm actually gonna post about it, and I'm gonna make sure to actually text you a picture of it, because it was visibly disgusting, but you wouldn't have been able to know it. You would have known it was disgusting the minute that you picked it up.
But did anyone else notice?
Nope, not at all.
Oh my gosh.
Not at all.
It almost reminds me of Dr. Deborah Verholden when she contracted COVID. It became a national story. Just one person had it, and then super spreader event. I mean, to me, things like that, oh, wow. That's unbelievable. But thank you for that. And so I guess we should be looking at the packets of our condiments to make sure that they at least appear to be clean, right?
Absolutely. And then, to be honest, if you are in a situation where you are near, let's say, somewhere to be able to wash them off, it's okay to wash them off. And I mean, the thing is the inside of the packet isn't contaminated, but it's the outside packaging of it is what can make you sick.
All right, pay attention, everybody, as we go and have a good time today. Please be careful. Please be careful. Even with these plastic forks and knives, be careful. Bring those, I guess, alcohol wipes. I keep them in my purse. That's why my purse is so heavy. I have all this stuff. Look, I know you thought I was a caution, but hey, I mean, it's just, it's got me a little... Everybody, let's talk about Juneteenth. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. How should we approach this holiday? Many people are calling it Freedom Day, Emancipation Day. Actually, that was the Emancipation Proclamation, which has been signed 2.5 years before. But the people of Galveston, the slave owners, and the citizens refused to tell the enslaved Black Americans that they had been freed. Refused to tell them. The Union Army had to be sent in to let them know. No, they are freed. And then they continued to deal with harassment on the streets of Galveston. People walked up to them, who's your owner? So they, in fact, were not freed. So let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Wow. Whew. What made you look at that, Dr. Knighton? I want to know.
Wait, matter of fact, it wasn't hard to see when I had to go open it up. It wasn't about something. It don't look like it was even hid to be like just physically dirty.
Are you serious?
I'm not playing. So it is. So I got that. I got a couple of things. I've been snapping pictures and doing videos just to catch footage on some things because, like, that is something. I mean, I know I emphasize it, but how I mentioned to you before, Santita, is like really me putting the emphasis on stuff that's present. I think is so important. Meaning, like, it's one thing to tell people about it, but it's another thing to me to show people. And so I'm getting into that phase now of visibly showing people what it is I'm talking about. Because I know, like, anything could seem like it's possible, but when people actually recognize it, then that's when they'll start paying attention.
I just have no words for that. Did you speak to the person who was the host of the picnic or the event?
So at that particular time, I did not, and that's only because there's a lot going on. It was an actual Juneteenth event.
Oh. Well, you know,
there was a lot going.
It's a lot going on, and quite frankly, to be honest with you, I mean, all HE double hockey sticks can break loose. You know, people get angry with you, and not just.
They sure do.
I mean, it's come on, y'all. It's all of that. It's all of that. So it's not as simple as, well, I'm just going to tell. No, because people become angry with you for telling them, hey, did you want you to check this out? Folks get mad with you for telling them, for saying, hey, you know, there's a problem here. And then people get angry with you because they just want to eat. They just rather not know.
Ain't that something? And that is, it's sad. It's true. And that's what I run into. Like, well, why you tell me that?
What do they say?
Well, why you tell me that? You should have kept that to yourself. Okay, my bad for trying.
Can you believe it?
I can, actually, because I've been told that.
Oh, my gosh.
So I'm trying to correct people. I say some nasty stuff and I tried to correct them. Maybe you should have kept that to yourself. So I'm like, okay.
Sending Attorney Patillo through. I got no answer from Diane Gibson, and Dwight McKee, every time he answers, he seems to hang up, so I'll try them both in a few minutes again.
You know what? You might want to have him call in.
It looks like he's doing that now. Hang on.
Oh, my. You want to stay in and listen to us talk about Juneteenth? You can weigh in if you like.
Absolutely. I'm happy to listen in.
Okay. You can weigh in if you like. Robert Patillo?
Good morning. How are you?
Look, thank you for
sending Dwight McKee through.
Thank you for letting me know about Senator Scott. Oh my gosh!
I told you he's a one-trick pony.
Oh my! But
60 seconds, everyone.
No, you are terrible, though, Robert. Did you say that publicly?
I did all the time.
Oh man! He just, his narrative is because I've made it. Not you can too. You all are telling lies about white folks, and you're telling lies about racism in America. And it's not just about white folks. It's just, look, I'm not trying to beat up on anybody. It's just goodness gracious. Why can't you all?
Well, you see, my issue with Tim Scott is that now, because he says that, now you have both Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy both saying the same thing, basically saying that, Indian Americans, we come over here, we make it instantly. What's wrong with y'all black people? Why y'all so lazy? I mean, I made it, why can't you? And so what happens when you have someone like Tim Scott, they can reference him and say, well, see, this black guy said it.
10 seconds.
So that must mean it's accurate.
Well, they'll have their moment. They all do. They'll have it. Just keep on moving.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am
Juneteenth, everybody. Happy Juneteenth. And really, it to me is a holiday for reflection, for education, for illumination. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and I want to thank them in a special way for giving me the space to have this kind of honest, earnest, forthright conversation about Juneteenth. In 1865, 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, enslaved Black people in Galveston, Texas, were told by Union soldiers that they were indeed freed. Many of them knew, not most, but many of them already knew. I was reading some narratives of people who had been enslaved. They said, oh yeah, we knowed we'd been freed. But if they behaved as freed people, they would have been killed. Their children would have been killed. So they had to just keep on going until their change came. And so the Union Army came into Galveston, Texas, after General Lee surrendered in Virginia. And Gordon Granger, who was a Union general, came in to let them know that they had been freed. Yeah. And the Emancipation Proclamation did free the people in Texas, but they were not told about it. And then they had further harassments, everybody. I was reading a Smithsonian Magazine article in which they said, no, Black people in Texas, Juneteenth didn't stop the enslavement of Black folks in Houston and in Galveston. Indeed, as they would walk down the street, white people would come up to them and ask them, who owns you? What are you doing here? Yeah. So let's talk about Juneteenth and the significance of the holiday. Let's first of all let's talk about what it is, talk about the significance of it and why it's significant today, why it has really primacy, Dwight McKee and Robert Patillo, over the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation takes us directly to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, but there's something about Juneteenth when you talk about the lies and the machinations of slave masters who refused, and citizens who refused to let Black people know that they had been freed. There's a lot going on here. Let me start with you, Robert Patillo. Why don't you set the table for us?
Well, I think it's important to realize in this context of Juneteenth that we still had to fight for over a century and a half after Juneteenth just to have federal recognition of American slavery. That the Condoleezza Rice said, slavery, segregation, Jim Crow are the fundamental birth defect to the United States of America. We have truly never come to terms with what that has meant to American society. We're not a country that had a Truth and Reconciliation Council to go through all the horrors of what happened. We cut off Reconstruction after barely a decade, never actually reaching its goals. And because of that, I think Jim Crow or Juneteenth is an opportunity for us to look at how far we have come, but also look back at the unfinished work of both the abolitionist movement and the civil rights movement of bringing about truth, parity, and equality in American society, to look at the current state of African American home ownership, of African American educational attainment, of African American economic attainment compared to our white counterparts, and see that the work is still not done, and we have to continue to push forward in even more radical ways, because we cannot wait for another 150 years to right the wrongs of slavery. We have to legislatively take it into our hands right now. This is this is not just a marathon, it's a relay, one generation to the next, and now it's time for this new generation to pick up that baton and take us across the finish line.
So when you hear people say that things have not changed, I said, that's insulting to Frederick Douglass, to Booker T. Washington, to Sojourner Truth, to Harriet Tubman, to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, to Fred Shuttlesworth, to Reverend Abernathy, to James Bevel, and we can just keep on going on and on and on and on. Reverend Jesse Jackson. It's insulting because they have continued the work. I mean, because we actually have made a lot of advances, but what did Condoleezza Rice say? This is the fundamental birth defect. It's in the DNA of the country, right?
And on that point, I think if you look at the current administration, for all of its failures on things such as voting rights, on criminal justice reform, on many things that were promised in 2020, if you look at this administration, you can't say that we haven't made progress in America. You can look at an African American vice president, an African American press secretary, an African American secretary of defense, an African American national security advisor, an African American UN representative, an African American on the Federal Reserve, an African American Supreme Court justice. So it's not that we have not made progress. It's just that we have to continue to push this ball across the finish line. The work is not done. But as you said, it is absolutely disrespectful to all the fights that have come before to say, well, y'all didn't get me across the line. No, I handed you the baton. Now you got to get us there.
Hey, everybody, call us at 773-763-9278. Ron and Janice, call back. Ron and Janice, call back. I want to hear your thoughts today about Juneteenth. Dwight McKee, your thoughts about the Juneteenth holiday.
Well, this wasn't a birth defect. This was a maternity ward. Slavery was a maternity ward. It is the basis. It was an aberration of how the country was founded. It was the basis of what the country was founded on. And so it is inherent to every institution in the country. Again, what the country is a stolen land cultivated by stolen people for the benefit of those who did the stealing. And they put a flag on top of it, put their hands on their heart, sung a song about it, but the inherent structure is the same. A stolen land cultivated by stolen people. And so,
to the benefit
yes, we made progress.
Of the thieves. No, don't miss that other piece. Your three pieces. Say that again.
For the benefit of the thieves who put their flag on top of it and sung a song about it, put their hands on their hearts and said, "My country 'tis of thee," and it never was. It was always, "My country 'tis of me." And so, yes, Juneteenth only operates in the context of understanding how the country was set up. That Texas was founded for the purposes of extending slavery through Mexico, who, because Santa Anna didn't have slaves at the time, and Spain had outlawed slavery in 1809, and there was a need to extend a slave system. So guys from Tennessee who were slave runners, Sam Houston and Jim Bowie and David Crockett, began to run slaves through Texas. And then they created a pretext to take over the land. So there was no surprise that white people wouldn't tell blacks they were free. Why would they? It was not in blacks' benefit to believe, to understand that they were free, because there was 2 extra years of free labor and 2 extra years of imposed servitude. And the fact of the matter is, chances are, if the generals and the black Union soldiers would not have gone into Galveston and would not have gone into Texas, they would have never told. They would have extended as far as they could. They still may not know, had not they come in and told them. So, I understand the purpose of Juneteenth at one level, because it's a good holiday for particularly blacks in Texas who've always celebrated it, and it's more of a regional holiday and has become national. But I also understand why white people are so easily convinced to celebrate it, because there is, there's no price to be paid. There are no consequences for it. I was saying on your father's show yesterday that most holidays are about a real victory, a real battle over your enemies. Passover, a Jewish holiday, is about God killing the firstborn of the Egyptians. And they celebrate that. Blood on the door. Santo de Mayo is about the Mexicans driving the French out. It's about victory. even the 4th of July is about the victory over the British, where British heads would roll. I would much rather see us celebrate Nat Turner and the insurrection. I think that'd be a holiday, because I think it's a better reference point for how we ought to perceive our real enemies, as opposed to the patriotism of, yes, they came in and, they finally freed us, and let's say a barbecue in Red Park, and celebrate the fact that white folk finally freed us.
Diane Gibson.
It does not do justice to our role in our own freedom.
It doesn't.
Yes, we made progress.
No, it doesn't do justice.
Let me finish this one. Yeah. Yes, we made progress, like Robert said, but every point of progress we made, it has been by resistance and by fighting. And those people you have named, they are heroes to us. But when you look at how they were treated in their time, they were always perceived as villains.
And enemies of the state.
And enemies of the state.
And
after they killed him, then they gave him a stamp.
And a statue.
After the state killed him, they gave him a stamp. That's right, in the statue.
Well, and that's why bringing Diane Gibson, who's really a long-time activist and organizer in Texas. She's been with Rainbow Push since its beginning, and has been an advanced person for Reverend, not just in Texas, but nationally. She had a funny story. Well, it's not really funny. It was kind of ironic about a visit Reverend Jackson made to Texas some years ago. Of course, he knew what Juneteenth was, but I think he was trying to make a point with you. And you said, Reverend, please stop. I got to live down here because this is a holiday that everybody's really excited about. And he said, I think we need to really think about this because maybe you're highlighting the wrong aspects. Diane Gibson, talk to me about Juneteenth.
Well, Juneteenth, as I stated, not being from Texas, I'm actually from Georgia. So coming here, I had never heard of Juneteenth either until I actually got here. And I kept saying, what in the world is Juneteenth? So naturally, that's what Reverend did the first time he came here. And he was saying, he was trying to make a valid point, as you were stating, because Commissioner John Wiley Price, who's actually a county commissioner here, known as our man downtown, the historian buff and all that. And so Reverend naturally took the opportunity, as he welcomes all challenges, to have him to explain to him why you actually celebrate knowing something 2 years after the fact. And that's what the whole conversation was about. But I was telling him, he's so serious about this Juneteenth thing. So you're going to drop this bomb here and then leave me here to face the consequences. I understand where you're going with this, but see, you're going to get back on that plane and leave me here.
But where was he going with this? Because you understood. You were like, yeah, because 2.5 years later, we're celebrating that? Because that's something Diane Gibson is not even amplified there. No one really talks about that part of it.
Right. It's just, let's celebrate. And even today, they're actually commemorating, knowing the fact that they got it 2 years late by doing a 2-mile walk this morning in the Fort Worth area. So they will be walking to commemorate. They're going to do 2 miles in recognition of the fact that they got the notice 2 years later. And so, I mean, again, I don't knock how you celebrate. We have always been a part of something that separates us. So why should this be any different? Is that here you have some that separates the 20th of May, and that would be me. And then you have some that separate Juneteenth. And so, again, we are divided, but we still decide to celebrate. So it's all in how you celebrate. My whole thing is, regardless of what day you celebrate, I think it should be a day you educate, not just a day you celebrate, but let's educate. We need to teach our young people, teach everybody, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? What is so significant about Juneteenth? And that's the only thing I continue to say. My niece is actually doing march in Taiwan, and that was the first thing I told her. Don't just march and celebrate and put on an event, but you need to have an educational resource to let people know in Taiwan, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? I admire her for actually doing the event, and it's a really large event. But take this opportunity to educate people. Anytime you get a captive audience and you can educate them on why we do what we do, then we should take advantage of that process. And so that's the only thing that I ask Santana. Don't just take this as a day off. Take it as a day on. That you actually say to people, here's why I celebrate this. I do admire the fact that when you continue to say, when people say, oh, no, we haven't made it anywhere. Now, here's my point on that, is that I am tired of hearing first black this, first black this. In 2023, we are still saying first black. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not happy with saying it. Don't get that confused. It is that I'm just saying we should be further along in 2023, that we're not still at first black. It just should be, they made an accomplishment. But that's the part that bothers me. Yes, I agree we have made some accomplishments slowly, but we're making them. I just want us to get past first black.
Well, Robert Patillo, why do you think it seems that Juneteenth is embraced with greater fervor than the Emancipation Proclamation? I mean, that's why do you think that is?
But because white people are able to blame somebody else for Juneteenth. When you think about it, they're able to say, oh, it wasn't us. It was those terrible people in Texas who were unnamed and unknown. But we definitely would have let y'all out 2 years beforehand. And because there's no responsibility associated with it, because there's no demand associated with it, there's no ask associated with it, it's very easy for them to take and to monetize, and they can turn into a great corporate event. That's nothing that America loves more than celebrating something they ain't do. And when you can talk about the freeing of the slaves, it's almost as if corporate America has taken this as Juneteenth, meaning that we're now over segregation or over racism in America. And we cannot allow them to take and pervert and change history to their own purposes in that way. I think that Juneteenth has to be a stepping off point for a conversation about true reparations to the United States of America. We just saw this weekend, Germany is making another $1.4 billion payment to the survivors of the Holocaust. And they've been making those payments every year for the last 70 years for the people who survived that. And God bless them. That's exactly the right thing they should be doing.
But that's just for 1 year.
We have to use it.
That's just for
That's
2024.
for 1 year. They make a payment of that nature every year for the last 70 years. They have a council that they put together that represents Holocaust survivors and negotiate with essentially the treasury of Germany every single year to determine how much those payments should be to both the survivors and the descendants of the survivors of the Holocaust. So as African Americans, when we're looking at the situation going on for other people, as we're celebrating Juneteenth, I love a barbecue as much as anybody else. I love a fish fry and I love a parade. I was in marching band all the way through high school and college. I love all those things. But that has to be the stepping off point, not just for a celebration where we go home at the end, but the end of the Juneteenth parade should be at the state capitol. It should be at Congress. It should be at the hands of the corporations who benefited from the transatlantic slave trade and the enslavement of Africans, and finding out how exactly we will finally make the promise of the nation true. Until we're willing and ready to do that, Juneteenth will be nothing but symbolism until we can push it to be actual change needed to bring about the equality of African Americans in this country.
Dwight McKee, what about telling the whole story? That is to say, that African Americans were not told that they were freed. And then there's a wonderful article in the Smithsonian that talks about Juneteenth it didn't stop the enslavement of Black people in Houston. That white people would walk up to them on the streets. Who owned you? I mean, they were treated as slaves, and Black folks had to function in that environment just to survive. Even if they wanted to escape, they had to hold up, wait a minute. I mean, what do you make of that? Because it's like we're not telling that. We have to tell that part of the story, Dwight. You can't depend upon someone else to tell it. Your thoughts?
Well, you don't have to even take that to Juneteenth. The fact of the matter is, you can stop with the Emancipation Proclamation, which is only a proclamation. It didn't free us. It declared we had the right to be free. There was no compensation for that 150, 200 years of slavery. It was just a pronouncement to say, okay, now you all have the right to be free, with nothing to work with other than a situation of another 200 years of oppression and depression and suppression. And like I said, we have to fight every step of the way to get as far as we got. I mean, because the reality of that we really never talk about is half of this country decided that slavery was more important to them than America. If they had to choose between being Americans and keeping their slaves, they left the country and founded their own country to have the right to impose slavery on a people for their own economic benefit. And so, I mean, we don't really deal with that part of the country for who they were, which was insurrection, was traitors who put together a whole new country and declared war on this country, only for raising the issue that we needed to be free. And so it really kind of, is in the DNA of the country, even today, that the suppression of black people is more important even than being an American. Because there's a real distinction between how you define an American and the citizenship issue and the rights of black people and those people who have decided that their whole basis of life, it functions around the suppression of black people. They made a movie about it called Gone with the Wind. They have never gotten over the fact that lifestyle is now gone with the wind. They lament that to this day.
Call me at 773-763-9278. We need to talk about this today. Several British arms companies and financial firms funded the Confederacy. A lot of people do, and we have to understand, remember, the Confederacy, as Dwight just made the point, was its own country. It was a civil war, and it was not just war between the states, it was war between two countries. This is the Confederate States of America, the CSA. Yeah. So the work of bringing America back together is still unfinished. We're still struggling with that. And it wasn't just a North-South thing. Remember, Delaware was a slave state. Yes, the great state from which Joe Biden, he doesn't hail from there, but certainly he represents it. It was a slave state. So let's talk about that today. Let's talk about Juneteenth and what it really, really, really means. Going to get some quick words from Robert Patillo before he has to leave quickly in the next segment. But we're going to bring on attorney C.K. Hoffler to look at the legal ramifications, because you did rightly point out, it came out in the news yesterday, that for 2024, more than $1 billion will go from the German government to Holocaust survivors. I mean, it's really phenomenal. But, when you talk about reparations for black people in America, we don't want to talk about that. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. All right, everybody, keep talking. Are you all still there? Shanina?
We have Attorney Patillo and Dwight McKee right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you all keep talking. Yes. Dwight?
Yeah, not only that, Robert, not only they paid these reparations for 70 years, is that they were paying reparations from World War I. That's what the side was about. is about who had to pay who for whom for what. That's why they had World War II, because they was tired of paying for World War One. That's what the war actually grew out of. What had happened at Versailles. And at the same time, they were paying each other for the destruction of Europe. Haiti had to pay the French for the right to be free.
Like the Irish are paying the British today.
Haiti was paying the British.
Like the Irish are paying the British today. That's when you get over to the UK. The Irish are the people of Northern Ireland are far to the left of us because they're
Sending Attorney Hoffler
they're
through.
in the heart. Thank you so much. They're in the heart of colonialism, and they let you know it. Do they not, Robert?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I think that the biggest issue that we have to remember is that globally, the concept of reparations is only controversial when it comes to African Americans. Everybody else understands the concept of reparations very clearly. It's only black reparations that are controversial. If you look at the entire country of Israel, Israel can be considered reparations for the Jewish community for what the Romans did. The Rome put you out, so we're going to give you reparations and give you your land back that doesn't belong to you. The black folks just asked for a check for something that happened 150 years ago when they try to say we're saying something outlandish. We have to make this global push for reparations, because if you take the entire colonized world and you repair them for what was done to them by Europe, you change the entirety of the global economic order.
Right?
Yeah, and white people are not willing to give up their wealth, that ill-gotten wealth, because they spent 400 years accumulating that wealth and militarizing that wealth and systematizing that wealth. And so that's why I said it ain't a birth defect. It is the maternity ward. It is that which produced the inequality of them being in charge, them having all of the money, and everybody else being subjected to that. And that's going to be a long, meandering battle. We have to keep fighting that fight every day, because they have no intentions of giving that up.
And even right on that point, when you're watching some of the poverty porn that we see nationwide or internationally, where they love to show starving people starve the developing world, but those people in the most fruitful and prosperous regions when it comes to agriculture, they're starving because the Europeans came and stole everything. And so instead of showing us these images of people starving and people doing bad, give them back their stuff and see what happens. I think you can look at all the former French colonies, or former British colonies, former Dutch colonies, and then you see the Queen with her, or the King now with his great star of Africa diamond sitting there. I think that's a way to everybody in the formerly colonized world to say, well, give us our stuff back if you have so many issues with the way we're running things.
Well, I got so tired of seeing Elvis crying in the middle of the night on TV, because I just said, this is just so false. These folks have stolen the wealth from the countries. And you go to Africa, you go to South Africa, that's the anger now, because Mugabe cut the deal that, quite frankly, Mandela did not cut. He said, first thing you're going to do is give me my land back. And when you get to Africa, the hero, may he rest in peace, is Mugabe. And you know it's true. I've got C.K. Hoffler here.
That's always the thing.
No, keep talking.
Good morning.
Yeah, that's always the thing about the European narratives about these things. They like to make their own heroes, and they make the hero whoever the person was who did fight back the most.
And when you do fight back, you are a mystery to them. I cannot tell you. CK was there. CK, when we were in France with President Macron, when the Reverend got the Legion of Honor, Reverend fascinated him. Did he not? First of all, they said
he did.
He never He's never late. He had Reverend and Jonathan hemmed up in conversation for more than an hour. We're just waiting, and the staff, you can see they were really thrown off. CK, isn't that what happened? They were like,
well, that is, well, his head of protocol was, pacing, walking around. Oh my God, this is preposterous. What's going on? It's doing the whole schedule. I mean, but it's having grown up there and lived in this reality. I do think colonialism, at least the thoughts of feeling the guilt of colonialism are
60 seconds.
Well, so I think when we talk about reparations, I heard the last part of the conversation. We talk about reparations. I agree with Robert and Uncle D that it's only something that's taboo when it comes to Black people. But there have been some reparations, not much, some reparations throughout the world that have been allotted for Black people. Very little, very few, almost non-mentionable, because it's so insignificant relative to the reparations for other groups of people who have been harmed and victimized and killed and tortured as we were. So that is, there is no progress being made, none whatsoever. Not in this country, not in any other country, but it does happen.
10 seconds.
Oh, yeah, because it's happening in Germany right now, and they give it to them every year. Over $1 billion in 2024 has been allotted. I mean, that's just off the top.
I'm talking about
Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
More and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, the special Juneteenth 2023 edition. Last year, Juneteenth was declared a national holiday. I want to know what you think about Juneteenth. How should we approach Juneteenth? In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 79 degrees. It'll be a beautiful day. 91 degrees in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820, based here in Chicago, but reaching out all over the country and all over the world. Ari down there in Brazil, all my brothers and sisters who listen in from all over the world, I want to thank you for that in a special, special way, because our story in the United States is your story in Brazil. For Abraham, our brothers and sisters in Venezuela, it's your story. It's a diasporic story. It's the story of the diaspora, and it's a world history story. So let's talk about Juneteenth. Why did it take more than 2 years for Black people to be told that they had been freed? The Union Army had to be sent into Galveston, Texas, to tell Black people, you have been freed. Many Black people there knew that they had been freed, but because of the customs and the violence of the slaveholders and the citizens of not just of that town, but of this, not just that county, but of the state and of the country. They knew they had to hold their peace, hold their powder, if you will, until change came. And they slowly got freedom with the backing of the federal government, the army. So when you look at Black people looking at the federal government today, looking to the federal government for support, not for a handout, for support, it's because that's what we've had to do. I understand Europeans coming here and saying, I don't want the government on my back. Well, Black people say, I need the government to have my back. And somewhere in between our two experiences is the truth of what the best in governance can give us. You want the government to have your back. You don't want it to be on your back. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about why we embrace Juneteenth, but not the Emancipation Proclamation, not so much. We don't really want to talk about that. Got a lot to talk about. Robert Patillo is going to be with us just for a few more minutes. We're joined by the former president of the National Bar Association, Court TV legal analyst and chair of Rainbow Push, attorney C.K. Hoffler, and, as we affectionately call him now, Daddy D, the brilliant social scientist, Dwight McKee. We're talking with all of you, them and you. I want you to call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Let's talk about Juneteenth. And the backdrop is, for 2024, more than $1 billion will be given in reparations to Holocaust survivors by Germany. And that should happen. That should happen. But the debate here in the United States is, what are we going to do about black people? They don't need anything, and then many of us just want a one-time check. What about the protecting of our institutions, everybody? What about that? What should reparations look like? Let's talk about all of this, but let's first talk about Juneteenth. On Juneteenth, that is now a national holiday. More than half of the American states acknowledge it as a national holiday. So let's talk about it. Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. And for those of you who have criticisms or who cheer this holiday, why don't you call? Why don't you call us at 773-763-9278? All right, everybody, let's get right to it. Here are some of the headlines. Juneteenth, everybody. Today is Juneteenth, the federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States, as acknowledged in Texas, everybody. Many businesses, post offices, and schools will be closed today. Let's talk about educating people about Juneteenth, because it's a little bit more complicated than slavery ending today, everybody. More than 50 million people across the Southeast face the threat of severe storms today, as widespread power outages have left nearly 500,000 homes across the South in the dark, including some sweltering under record-breaking temperatures. Some of the temperatures are as high as 121 degrees, everybody. Please be careful out there and check on your neighbors. Check on your neighbors and get to some libraries and some cooling stations, police stations, fire stations, wherever you can go, so that you can have your life preserved today and drink a lot of water. Chinese President Xi Jinping and top American diplomat Secretary of State Antony Blinken met in Beijing today in a potentially crucial step toward mending U.S.-China relations, which are said to be at their lowest since these relations were resumed in 1979. Blinken is the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Beijing in 5 years, with the two global powers increasingly at odds over a host of issues. Indeed, China is now, according to the McKinsey Company, perhaps the preeminent business and financial company in the world. According to their study, their data from 2022, the largest economy on earth is now China. President Joe Biden will announce new federal funding for climate resilience projects today, according to the White House. It comes less than a week after 4 major environmental groups backed President Biden's campaign for a second term in a notable joint endorsement. And those are just some of the headlines. Let's get right to Juneteenth. What is it? And why is it important that we acknowledge it? Before you go, why don't you set the table for us once more? Robert Patillo, I know you got to go. Number one, what is Juneteenth? Why is it significant? Why do we look at it? Why do we embrace it? And not the Emancipation Proclamation as much. Just kind of give it to us.
Oh, well, this is kind of the Reader's Digest version of it. Exactly. The Reader's Digest version of this has to be this understanding that African Americans throughout their entire experience within America have been lied to, have been tricked, have been exploited. And Juneteenth is simply another example of such, of even after being emancipated, only being informed of it years later. And people, I want them to dive into this area of scholarship, because one thing, if you notice, if you think back to your primary school education, they very much made it seem like the period between the end of the Civil War and World War II was about 2 weeks. They generally skip over much of what happened in that interceding period. I want people to understand that even after Juneteenth, even after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, black people remained enslaved in the South, sometimes for as much as 100 years thereafter. You have the inmate lease system. You have the prison labor system. You have black folks who were simply picked up and held on plantations until the end of their days. There were some people who were found still to be enslaved in the South as late as the 1960s. So Juneteenth is an opportunity for us to look back and commemorate both what happened, but also to tell the stories of those who have never had a voice in America, to ensure that we are putting forth the true version of American history. There's a reason that Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and all these other folks are trying to get these books out of schools and trying to get rid of this history, because they know that once you know what truly happened, you'll be motivated to make changes going forward. Juneteenth is not just about fish fries and barbecues. It has to be about truly exercising the dream of all of our ancestors and bringing about the freedom and equality needed for the African Americans who survived 400 years of oppression in the United States of America.
You know, Robert, because I have to tell you before you go, when I and Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Dwight McKee, when my friends who are not Black find out about Juneteenth, when they find out that Black people were not told that they had been freed for a couple of years, they're appalled. They're like, why didn't I find this out in school? What can we do about this? I'm like, well, there's a lot that we can do. Number one, you got to tell the story. I mean, they're genuinely appalled. Why do you think the sense of insult and being appalled is just such a part of the American experience too, Robert?
There's a question of not just being appalled. They were appalled enough to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing to say that it shocked my conscience, but there's a reason that when you see these people, the current campaigners are saying, well, I don't want our kids to grow up to hate white people. That's sort of the fears you hear from many of these MAGA book burners. And in reality, yes, they should be appalled. They should be angry once they find out what happened, but they're consciously be shocked to the point of doing something about it. And then that's when we have to transition to this conversation around reparations. Even Chuck Todd, I guess now that he's been fired from Meet the Press, their entire special on reparations yesterday on Meet the Press, the conversation is there. The models are there. Now the question is for 2024, as we're celebrating this national holiday of Juneteenth, how can we ensure that that is part of the national platform that is put forward, that we're part of the discussion? We're not just simply hiding in the shadows saying, well, when you get some time, Master, see if you can get to my reparations. We have to make sure there's a central aspect of the 2024 campaign cycle and ensure also that as the Democratic primary race starts in South Carolina, where Black folks have the strongest voice, that we don't get it on the agenda there. I don't know where we'll get it on the agenda at.
So is there anything you'd like to say before you go about Juneteenth?
Last thing for me is just make sure that you're taking this as a day on, not a day off. Use this as a day to educate yourself and people in your community and family about the true history of racism, segregation, and slavery in this country, and begin this conversation on how we move to a place where we can be having headlines, just like the Jewish community in Germany has, about what this year's reparation payment will be to the Black community.
Robert Patillo, everybody, every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time on WAOK. And the show is growing, and we're so excited about that. He'll be here. Of course, he's from Rainbow Push. We'll be at the Rainbow Push Convention July 15th through the 19th. You need to be there. Attorney C.K. Hoffler joins Dr. D, Dwight McKee. It's a day on, not a day off. Let's talk about Juneteenth. Your thoughts, C.K. and Attorney C.K. Hoffler. You've lived around the world. You've been in school around the world. I mean, as a child, and you've been to school in Switzerland as a child. You have been to school in Canada as a child. So I bring that up because, you're a little bit closer to the European thinking than we are. You're multilingual and all of that. I mean, I think you dream in French. That having been said, come on, Portuguese, something, one of the Romance languages. I mean, talk to me, because you made a point during the break that I think we need to illuminate. As we see that more than $1 billion will go to Holocaust survivors, Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Dwight McKee from Germany. I mean, that news came out yesterday, and I said, I think we need to explore that. They will pay, according to this USA Today report, Holocaust survivors over $1.4 billion next year, just for 1 year. Now, mind you, they've been paying these reparations for more than 70 years. They will go to one-time payments for the survivors and welfare programs, $888.9 million. Total in funding will go toward home care services with an additional $105 million going toward survivors. Increased needs, a one-time payment each year until 2027, including more than 128,000 recipients of the hardship fund, and on and on and on and on. But you said this is standard operating procedure. This is standard practice all over the world. But when you talk about repairing, restoring, making things right with Black people, particularly Black people in America and Black people in Haiti, Black people in the diaspora, there's a lot of pushback. Talk to us. Dwight, you want to say something before CK does?
Yeah, real quick on that. But let me tell you what the difference is. The difference is the Jews moved into Germany from Russia, from the Caucasoid Mountains for the most part. They moved into the Germans. It was the Germans' land. In this situation, what you have is you talk about the Europeans say, get off our backs, and we say, government, get our backs. But what the Indians should be saying is, give our land back.
Mm-hmm.
Is that this was other people's land. These were invaders. The name of the Boston team is the Patriots, but the name of the Tampa Bay team is the Buccaneers and the Pirates. These were thieves who came and stole other people's land. And so the fact of the matter is, the country should be paying the natives rent for the land that they stole. They should give the lease and the titles back to the Indians and pay them rent. And then we can negotiate with the natives in terms of what they want to do for us in the proposition. But this is stolen land. This was not the Europeans' original land. And so they really need to work out a system, in my opinion, to compensate the Indians for the land that they've stolen, that they had the benefits on, pay them rent if they want to keep the land. That's why I say they get a 10% management fee, and then let us negotiate with the natives in terms of what they think we ought to have for cultivating the land. They would be much fairer than these white people.
Well, before I go to CK, then what do you say to some black people who will say they don't want they feel it's a black-white discussion, not a black-white and indigenous discussion? Speak to that.
Oh, I think that they are as wrong as the white people. I think I always learned, like Mark's position, is that we have to first make it right with the people who stole the land from. Everything starts there. That we have to start from 1491 if we're going to really deal with this proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it right with them, to give them what is rightfully theirs. We need to give Mississippi back to the Navajo and the Chaco and the Cherokee. We need to give Georgia back to the Cherokee. The nations, the 5 nations that they may walk out of their land to go to Oklahoma during the Trail of Tears. We need to give it back to them. We need to give Illinois back to the Iroquois and the Potawatomi. That is their land that we stole from them, took from them, killed them, and made them go to another place so that Europeans could have this for their own benefits. We need to start with where the wrong was. The first thing they teach you in psychology, if you want to get well, is you have to go back to what traumatized you. Start from where the violation was and work it out from there. We need to go back to the original violation, which was stealing the land in the first place. Again, we worked the land, but we were stolen people working stolen land. So you can't deal with the stolen land and the stolen labor without dealing with the thieves that did the stealing. These were not settlers. These were invaders. These were thieves. They glorified it. They sanitized it. But the fact of the matter, these are murderers and thieves who kill real people and stole their land, who killed another real people, suppressed them, and make them work for free for their benefits.
Well, CK,
you have to really start there.
Absolutely. And CK, if you accept that premise, if you do, or just let me know the premise that is that you believe. I mean, what about reparations and restoration? And of course, I'm going to come back to you on the other side of the break, but I've got about 2.5 minutes, which is not enough time, but, just get things started here.
Well, this is inextricably linked to Juneteenth. When we talk about reparations in this country, there have been many, many initiatives, not just litigation. I was actually involved in litigation, but initiatives from different states. For instance, right by you, in Evanston, Illinois, Alderwoman Robin Ray Simmons, I believe her name is, she secured $10 million for a grant for African Americans, and that has been tied to reparations. In the United States, there have been there have been resolutions passed in various states, counties, and the like. State of California, Providence, Rhode Island, District of Columbia, Burlington, Vermont, Asheville, North Carolina. The concept of reparations and implementing it on a county or local level is not new, and many are working through the system that way. But there's been no federal mandate, no federal legislation to make it right, although many are pushing forward on the state and local level. We have to think about that. Now, globally, there's a CARICOM lawsuit by 15 Caribbean nations. There's in Holland, the United Kingdom, and France for reparations. There are many parts to that. It's not just about monetary reparations. It's about programs. It's about education. It's about providing a cultural base and foundation to repair and to do better and to correct the sins of the past. But there's been no huge global effort as it relates to Black people that has been entirely successful. I applaud what's happening, and I think it's a great thing, the billions of dollars that have been awarded and will continue to be awarded to Holocaust survivors. That's exactly the mere type of approach we need to take to have similar actions for Black people. And in fact, with the litigation that we were involved in, we did take a page from the playbook of Holocaust survivors. It just has not been successful as it relates to people of African descent globally, although there have been some measures, like in South Africa, we've seen reparations as it relates to the victims, and which is the entire country, all Black, of the apartheid regime. But it's not been on a global scale successfully executed as we see with other groups that have successfully received reparations.
What's the holdup here? Well, when we get back on the other side, I want you to speak to that. Why is there pushback against restoring reparations for Black people? This repair, restoration. Indeed, if we go to the United Kingdom right now, if we go to Great Britain, you will hear the same cries with the same fervor from the people of Northern Ireland. Same thing, I promise you. They're paying more in restitution to the British Crown than the Haitians are paying to the French today. Oh, this is a real deep problem, everybody. And but I've got to know, Dwight, I got to go to break, but we'll be right back. I promise you. Absolutely. Stay right there, everybody. Call us at 773-763-9278. Renee, I promise you we're getting to you and getting to everybody else. 773-763-WCPT. Let's talk about Juneteenth and all that this means on the Santita Jackson Show. Just know when I'm at 28 or 29 out of the hour, I'm trying to get out because I'm on more than one station. But keep talking. Dwight?
He was talking.
No. Okay. Did you all want to say something? Okay.
I'll wait for the break.
We're on the break. Oh, you wait till you come back? Okay.
I mean, after the break. Yeah, I will do come back.
Yeah. Santita, this whole, it's so appropriate, and this is, as I said, completely linked to Juneteenth for us to talk about this, because I think people should not lose sight of what we need to take away from Juneteenth. Again, it's not about the barbecue and watermelon. We all like to barbecue, and that we don't all, but barbecuing and watermelon, that's traditionally how many, not all of us. I mean, I wish I could eat barbecue today, but I still can eat watermelon. But I think traditionally that's how it manifests itself. If you right now survey across the country, no matter what time zone, people are preparing for family picnics where they will celebrate because it's a holiday in many places. I'm not sure if Florida is observing it as a holiday. That's why I'm not sure what they're doing in Texas, which ironically it should be in Texas. but I'm not sure the implementation and execution is still in play in Texas because not all businesses honor and observe Juneteenth, whether it's perceived as a federal holiday or not. Just like all businesses don't honor and observe the King holiday, even though it's a federal holiday. Mm-hmm. So all of these things we have to take into consideration. What we need to look at is, yes, reparations, number one, but two, pushing back on this notion educationally that we should not be able to be taught, or that this country, that students, that children in the public school systems, which will account for the majority of the children in the country, should not be taught American history. That things such as the need for reparations, things such as Juneteenth, by the way, would no longer be taught and would be eradicated from the school system because they cause people to hate one group or another. Well, that is the whole notion of critical race theory and why we shouldn't teach American history. To me, is utter nonsense, and that is something that we should fight back against because of the tentacles of that. The tentacle. The reason why I remember when I was growing up, there were only two real programs or three programs on TV where we saw Black people. We saw the Jeffersons, we saw Good Times, and maybe I forget the show that Diane Carroll was on.
Dynasty.
And then we had
Julia.
No, before Dynasty. Julia. And we had I Spy. We had I Spy with the Bill Cosby.
Mission Impossible.
Shows growing up. Mission Impossible. Right. I'm talking about 60 shows. But when it came to the sitcoms, there was more of a caricature of African Americans. Not saying that it wasn't progress. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy Good Times or the Jeffersons. I'm just saying that there were very few role models for us to look up to. Things evolved, have changed. But when you talk about teaching history, a history that we must learn and why it's important.
60 seconds.
It affects how people think about themselves. The psychological, Paul Stein's book, The Wretched of the Earth, still remains to me one of the most poignant educational books that we should all read because it talks about the psychology of colonization, the psychology of decolonization, the remnants of it. And so what we're seeing right now in this country, the hatred, the self-hatred, all of the things that are a byproduct of decolonization and colonization are real and true. We need to think about that and think about that as a baseline so that we can see how we improve and not repeat the mistakes that we made in the past. So
let's stay right there.
And execution is important.
Stay right there. I'm coming in, and I have some callers who want to come in. So I want you to go from that because we're going to pivot to the callers after.
10 seconds.
You finish your statement, okay? Because that's
okay.
This is a whole lot. Thank you, Renee, Robert, Dave Dowling, my sweet.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am free.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Dwight McKee, Dr. D, Daddy D, the brilliant social scientist, and of course, the brilliant C.K. Hoffler. She is on Court TV throughout the week. Legal analyst there, chair of Rainbow Push, former president of the largest and oldest Black Bar Association in the world. When will you be on Court TV this week?
I will be on Court TV tomorrow. I was supposed to be on today, but I have to push to go to a funeral, so it's been pushed to tomorrow morning. And on Thursday, tomorrow to be at 10 o'clock, and Thursday to be at 9 a.m.
All right. So let's I wanted you to put a button on what you were saying on the other side, because you're just having lived in Canada, having lived in Switzerland, having lived overseas, and having spent a lot of time in Africa, working as a lawyer, negotiating peace settlements, helping countries to come together and to write their constitutional documents. People, you don't understand just how brilliant Attorney C.K. Hoffler is, and the depth and range of her and breadth of her experiences. Why is there such a pushback on Black people and reparations? And I brought up the Irish because they consider themselves to be the Blacks of the UK. They're like, there's no difference between us and what you deal with. Now, when they come to the United States, they're able to become white, if you will, because the whiteness is a political designation. It's, and so the Irish who we've seen over here traditionally are not like the Irish you see when you get over to the UK, CK, as you well know. They're on a whole different thing. Whew. But I'm sorry, but go on.
Well, as it relates to people of African descent, it is a racial issue. I think you ask, why has it not received the traction? Why has it not been successfully implemented? When you look at it here in the United States, the barriers, or you look at it globally, race is a dominant factor. Race was a dominant factor of the reason why we were enslaved. And race is a dominant factor of why we don't receive reparations. There are many movements at Congressional Black Caucus, and as I mentioned before, on state and local levels. There have been many movements, resolutions passed, and the like. But in terms of getting a resolution in the United States, the racial factor, the discriminatory factor, I believe, is the main reason to account for that. Having been involved in litigation, when you do litigation that relates back to events that happened centuries ago, you always have what's called a statute of limitations issue, meaning you only have a time certain within which to bring a civil cause of action. But there have been cases that were successful. You've been able to get around that issue. And for the Holocaust victims, that has happened. And so when we look at what's happening in Oklahoma, there's more litigation on a regular basis in an attempt to get reparations for people of African descent. For what happened in Greenwood, for what happened in different states and different cities. But that statute of limitations is a major legal hurdle. But it's so interesting how some groups have been able to get around the statute of limitations. And we have crafted our litigation in a similar way as those who've been able to get around the statute of limitations arguments, but yet we have by and large not been successful to date. Although I do believe if there was going to be a success story, it probably would be in Oklahoma first. So what has happened on state levels, local levels, municipal levels, where people are working this system that way. But race is a big factor. So you mentioned the case of Ireland. Well, there's cultural oppression. Religion is a religion, is a religion, is a religion. Religious diversity, religious disputes, religious wars have always existed, just as people have been oppressed as it relates to race. So I think what we're seeing in Ireland and their feeling is just as you said, as significant as we feel it here, those especially who are really entrenched in reparations, debate, discussion, execution, and litigation. I think that is a religious distinction that for some is just as powerful of a divisive in division as race. And that's why we see it even amongst majority groups. So that's how I would account for the difference in Ireland. When when there's a different religious freedoms are described differently. For some, the victims may experience similar terrible acts against them, death, murder, incarceration, and the like, just based on religious differences. That is something that has existed in the world from time immemorial as well. So that is my assessment. But race in this country, as we know, is the remnants of being oppressed, the remnants of slavery, whether we're talking about indigenous people, whether we're talking about African Americans, of the injustices that we have sustained, that's still, we live and breathe that. And if you aren't convinced of that, just look at what's happening in Florida. The whole discussion around critical race theory, that is and the not being able to use diversity, inclusion, equity in any state publications and in books that you read, taking books off the shelves, that's censorship. All of that is surrounding race. So I don't think that we can, now that doesn't mean that we haven't overcome a lot and we haven't gone very far. We have, but we have to recognize it and call it what it is.
Well, it's racism.
These are race-related discussions.
It's racism. I think we have to go to the heart of that, because race is not the issue. Racism is.
Racism and discrimination, but it emanates from race.
Well, but very quickly, Dwight, because I've got to bring, very quickly, Dwight, because I got to bring these callers in. Yes?
That's part of the issue, but reparations was when we're dealing with a legitimate government.
Mm-hmm.
You can't understand this country by understanding the Constitution or the Emancipation Proclamation. You only understand this country by reading the treaties. They don't teach the treaties. The decade, the Europeanists negotiated a relationship with the natives, and they put in writing what the concessions was and what the deal was. And every 10 years, they then violated that, created a new situation in a new treaty. If we just honor the existing treaties that this renegade government had with the natives and went back to those original deals, you would need reparations, because you would then honor the commitments that the country made to the original natives. Honor that, let that be the retribution. And again, we can then work it out with them, but the treaties would say, for us taking this land, here's what we owe you. For us taking these mountains that are sacred to you, here is what your compensation is. And so the fact of the matter is the treaties really negotiated rent in perpetuity for the taking of these lands. If we just honor them, you wouldn't even need to do with reparations. You do with restoration. I think that should be more of the conversation.
Well, you know what?
Give them what we've already. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I'm hearing you. I just want to bring these. I want to bring the callers in because they've been waiting patiently. Ron from Michigan. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Santita and folks. You know, reparations tied to Juneteenth. It's important for this country to recognize its history that has caused so much harm to this country, and the fact that the racial component and the lack of willpower on the United States to honor the reparations that are overdue, but also ties into Daniel Ellsberg's passing and the imperial aspect of our enslavement or attempts to enslave the other people, especially Vietnam. You know, reparations is long overdue for Black people and for Vietnam. And we already are talking about reparations for Ukraine. Okay, and this goes to Daniel Ellsberg and his exposing the Vietnam War and its war crimes of the United States and perpetuating a war that was illegal and immoral from the very beginning. We can even go back to Eisenhower and Nixon, who did not honor the 1949 peace treaty that Vietnam won, when elections were supposed to be held, and Ho Chi Minh would have won over 80% of the vote. But Eisenhower and Nixon said no. White supremacy was going to rule in Indochina. And you got the Vietnam War. And now Nixon is trying to be honored as a hero for his actions in Vietnam, a war criminal and a traitor. But this ties all in to our history that is not being taught, going back to Juneteenth, which is very important. And it's just ironic, again, that it falls on, in my opinion, Daniel Ellsberg, a true. And here's the thing, Daniel Ellsberg, who was a voice of, how do you say, the most important voice of the anti-war movement. And to this day, now he's being disrespected by all the progressives and leftists. He's being portrayed as a Russian traitor, like he was portrayed against the Vietnam War. He was called a Russian traitor. And the CIA has just engulfed us with this war fever in Ukraine and Russia, and the atomic specter is over us. And it's just amazing how the CIA has taken taking the voice of any reason out of any discussion about this war in Ukraine and Russia. Just total escalation. No talk of peace treaties. And Daniel Ellsberg was a early opponent of the Ukraine Russia, saying the United States exacerbated the situation and instigated this conflict. But oh man, what can I tell you? I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I get excited about this stuff. And I just see this whole the Gulf of Tonkin replaying again and again. It's just it's so good, Santita, to have this discussion. You're one of the only voices out there that we can voice our opposition or our skepticism of our government. And again, I applaud you and God bless you and your panel.
Well, you know what? I tell you, I do that because I love America. I love the idea. I love the reality of America. I love America for all that it is, all that it isn't, and all that it could and should be. And you can't say that you love a person or an institution if you're not willing to criticize it and make it better. You can't. You can't. If anyone or anything is above criticism, they are in a dangerous space, and you need to watch out for them. You can't be criticized. That's a problem. America, when people say love it or leave it, no. I've been here 400 plus years. If you see me, stop that. Because if you see a black person over here, we came over here on an imperial project, and it's almost been 600 years. We go back to the 1400s. So they just need to stop. And we need to stop. And we need to grow up in our politics and grow up as people and grow up as a people so that we can honestly look at who we are. Because I'm sure as a veteran, you have got to be insulted that the order of the president a just order would be disrespected in this way. He had written the Emancipation Proclamation more than 2 years before. And so then you got to after his death, you got to send the army in. And mind you, his vice president was the Indian killer. Someone who was to the far right of him. It's got to be insulting to you as a veteran.
Yes, ma'am.
It's got to be.
One final point from me, Santita.
Yes.
According to Professor Gates and his historical findings, Angela Davis's ancestors came over on the Mayflower.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Did you know that?
I wouldn't be surprised. No. Because you can look at black people and you know our history. She is from one of the most storied families in Black American history. They're very educated. She studied over in Germany. This is someone who's at the top of the American food chain. So I'm not surprised by that at all. No, not surprised. Not at all. But sweetie, keep listening, because I got to go to some of these other callers. But are you doing okay?
Thank you, Santita. Yes, ma'am.
You
Thank
are?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Sending you my prayers. I heard a little tension. I just want to make sure you're doing all right, okay? All right, sweetie. Let me go to Robert from Gurnee. Robert, you have a question for Dwight. How you doing, hon?
I'm doing pretty good. I wanted to echo what Dwight said about us looking at history and looking how this all began. And my white friends out there, you know what I'm talking about. We are the ones, white society are the ones hundreds of years ago that started this entire problem. They came here uninvited, started slaughtering people and enslaved people. If we start to talk about that history alone, it's inescapable because white people understand it. They need to be told about the doctrine of discovery. They need to understand the corrupt vision that was guided this country from the very beginning. And then you can easily accept we owe these people everything that they worked for. And that doesn't mean that everybody else gets thrown into poverty. There's plenty of resources. There's plenty of compassion. There's plenty of sympathy from all the people that are invested in this situation now. But it's just a question of being truthful. Every single treaty that was ever negotiated, as soon as they found resources, it was just breached. And then the native tribes would just run right over and murder.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody else that disagreed with that, they were also a target. And at the time, we got 250 years minimum of knowing about this. And if you go back to the 1500s, we were talking, 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we witnessed this, that we were not invited here. We came across this thing, and all of a sudden, we claim it's ours. And Americans got to face up to that. We got to realize it's not the country that's been harmed. It's millions of people that have been harmed, are being harmed, and will continue to be harmed because we won't face up to what we know happened.
Well,
it was
Robert,
unjust. It was Go ahead.
No, because I have a question for you. I mean, because I love this engagement. Why do you think it's hard for, well, I guess, it's a human thing, but why do you think you were speaking to white people directly? And I hear you and I feel you.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think this is a hard conversation for many white people, not all, but many to hear?
I think it's twofold. I think some of it is just, ignorance. They're totally unaware of, like when the story about Tulsa, Oklahoma came out, people were like, I never knew this even happened. But what I really think it is underneath the surface, I think white people know the people of color have gotten a bad deal, and they're fearful of revenge. And that's why I'm saying you got to talk about the good heart, the compassion, and really the compassion and sympathy that I've learned from people of color since I was a little kid. Because I went to a nursery school, it was all black people. And so maybe that informed me for some reason, but I've had more than enough experiences to realize I've had more white people screw me over than I have people of color. And I've had plenty of people of color be kind to me, fair with me, teach me things, cause me to think about things that I never even thought about. And I think it's fear, and I think white people got to get over it. There's plenty of compassion. Go ahead.
And the irony of it all, and I'm so glad you called, is that the natives and black people are gracious enough and loving enough to say, okay, you did all this to us, but we're willing to operate in brotherhood, forgive you for the most part, and kind of start over. It's there that beneficent to say, white people, you killed our ancestors and you stole our land and you raped our children, but we're willing to start over. It is, as you said, white people's fear that they have to give some things up, that they won't be dominant, they need to be superior, that locks them into these lies. And so they won't call themselves war criminals, which they are. They call themselves patriots. They redefine the narrative because they can't feel bad about themselves. They can't be honest with themselves. And again, only the truth can set you free. And I'm glad that you brought up the treaties. It is in the treaties that the resolution is in because they had already committed to some things with the natives and that they violated. And if you go back to the original treaties and deal with just that, then you can resolve a lot of this.
Well, it's very interesting.
There's responsibility to compensate the natives for what's still in their land.
And they call themselves the indigenous people. Let's just establish that. But Robert, you were saying?
And I think what's really interesting is that the Pope just a week ago or so repudiated the doctrine of discovery. And I'm always shocked of how many well-educated people, I'm in a book club, they're well-educated. They never heard of the doctrine of discovery. And I said, who knows about the doctrine of discovery? The original, the original tribes, they all know about it. Mm-hmm. I met a young woman, a Cherokee woman, and we're sitting around, and I just kind of commented about it, and her eyes lit up. And she told me things about Columbus Day that I didn't understand. She told me all kinds of things. And I'm saying people got to realize the Pope just repudiated. He just repudiated a doctrine that is monstrous. that legitimized the murdering of people, and in black letter law said that the tribes and African people were subhuman. They didn't beat around the bush about it.
Well,
That's why it's being repudiated, because it's such a vulgar idea. It's like no one can accept that as being the truth.
Well, he's not crazy. He also has access to those Fatima prophecies, which say a whole lot. And I will say this, CK, I've got about a minute for you before I have to begin to wrap things up. CK?
Well, Santita, I go back to la lucha continua, victoria y cierta. The struggle continues and victory is certain, but you have to understand and embrace that, and that's what we should take away from Juneteenth. Don't for a second rest on any laurels. There's no laurels to rest on, although we do rest on the shoulders of the great, extraordinary leaders like your dad, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Dr. King, and so many who've always fought for reparations ultimately. Everything, when you fight for justice, you're fighting for making wrongs right. You're fighting for reparations. Reparations is just a term that people use to do that. But we have to remember that the fight continues. If you look at every single aspect of this country, you would recognize that our struggle and the fight must continue to fight injustice. Racism is alive and well. It doesn't mean that we didn't make progress over the past. Of course we have. But we have a duty to fight more. And for the young folks out there who have the energy, who we are passing the baton to, we encourage them to look at issues like reparations, look at issues like discrimination, racism, like immigration issues, all the things that are happening. Look and watch what's going on at the level of the U.S. Supreme Court. All of these issues are playing out on that level from a legal standpoint. Look at the litigation that continues where we're fighting for reparations, and engage and join. Young lawyers, I tell them all the time, engage and join. Even if you are a corporate or a tax lawyer, engage and join the fight, because that degree means something and people need us to continue to fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and the struggle does continue, and victory is certain if you continue with the struggle, everybody. Juneteenth is our collective holiday. It's Black history, it's white history, it's indigenous history, it's American history, it's Asian American history. As the AAPI community, as we see them really pushing for reparations for Black people because of what they have experienced. That was a wonderful story on CNN over the weekend. We're all in this together, everybody, and we're going to get well together, or we're not going to get well at all. And that's just the end of that. There was a little white child who was a preschooler who my father went to a school when he was running for president in 1987-88, and this child was in the corner shaking with fear. The other kids ran up to him, hugged him, and my father, being a father, walked over to him in the corner just very cautiously. He said, "Son, are you okay?" And he was quiet. He was absolutely traumatized by my father's presence. But his parents, in short, had told him that if he becomes president, he is going to do to us what white people have done to his people. That's the thinking. Let me tell you, no one has cornered the market of nobility and being ignoble. We all have to grow up in our politics and grow in grace and wisdom and be strong enough to face the truth. It is at the truth that we will have the transformation. I love you, everybody. May you have a blessed Juneteenth. Illuminate, educate, then celebrate how we got over. I love you, everybody. God bless you. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. We're going to get some closing thoughts from this wonderful panel, including Robert and Jewel. I love you. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. All right. You know what? Is Jewel still there? Devin?
Yep, I can send her through.
Please send her through. Jewel?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
I'm sorry, sweetie. I couldn't get to you, but keep talking to me, babe.
Oh, so are we on Facebook Live right now?
Yes, we are, and YouTube. Absolutely.
Yes, I just wanted to say happy Juneteenth. It's important that we commemorate that the Texans suffered an additional 2 years. And again, it's very important that we get the reparations that we absolutely deserve, especially with the mounting issues and critical circumstances
that the people of color face in modern times. It's very important that we stress the voting rights as well, because these are the issues that can get us across the line, that we can all live together in harmony, all colors. That's why I stress that we post and share this show, because these are the conversations can be had on this platform. And I appreciate all that you do, Santita. That's why I wake up very early. I have a lot of reasons to wake up early, but the first thing I want to do is make sure I post your show. Amen.
I just love you and appreciate you more than I can say, Jewel, because you start pushing online, getting people to call and keeping people together. And you are just an absolute gem. You are. Stay right there. I want to get some. Oh, okay. Well, because I want to get some closing thoughts from the panel here. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what say you?
Only person you have left is Dwight McKee.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts about today and about having discussions like these. You just heard Jewel say, wait a minute. And you heard Robert say, look, having an honest discussion where we're not having talking points, where, they're not going. And I think that the festivals and the picnics are important to everybody. But if you do not tell the history, you are being derelict. You're being negligent. You really need to dig down on this holiday. You really do. Dwight?
I don't want to blow past what the white brother talked about when he talked about the doctrine of discovery. Because the doctrine of discovery gave legitimacy, theological legitimacy, and made part of your religious calling the execution of people of color and the exploitation of people of color, and gave as a mandate any white Catholic the obligation to go and conquer any person that was non-white and non-Catholic. And though the Pope apologized, and I'm glad that he did, what he didn't do was open up them vaults where they stole all of that money and all of that gold and all of that wealth from those people in those foreign lands that the doctrine of discovery gave them the right, the Constitution was, gave them the right to go into and steal everything that they could and take back in the Vatican. That wealth still exists, it's still in the vaults, and it needs to be taken out and given back to the people that it was stolen from. And when you talk about understanding history, that is part of what's not taught. When you talk about the treaties, that's part of history that's not taught. And that's why even as we discuss America, we discuss it in ignorance because we don't understand the country. We don't understand how the country came about. We start from the Declaration of Independence, but there was an imposition of a reality that was already negotiated, that was already violated. We really have to start there to understand how this country is put together and what the obligations in this country really are.
Everybody, the truth will set you free. It will. It will. And we're not going to be free until we are willing to face up to the truth. We're just going to be prisoners to a lot of pain. But there have been, through this pain, we've seen a lot of possibilities. Through this pain, we've seen a lot of power, empowerment of people who've been subjugated, people who felt that they were less than, who finally came into their consciousness, who came unto their God selves and began to understand who they really are. Yeah. So think about that. And let us be courageous enough to tell the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, the truth. There is no such thing as my truth or your truth. Nobody owns the truth. God owns the truth, and that truth is neutral. It is or it isn't. So let's talk about what we really are dealing with, everybody. That's the real deal. Robert, you have something to say? You still there, sweetie? Is Robert still there? I thought he was. Dwight, is there anything you'd like to add before we go?
No, I thank you for opening this up to a real honest discussion. And I was very impressed with the callers today. I think that they're right on top of this.
Yeah, I think, Dwight,
Happy Juneteenth, y'all.
I think that people want to know. I think that people really want to have honest, forthright discussions. Because I think that Americans are far wiser, smarter, and more willing to move forward and upward than the establishment gives them credit for being or wanting to be. I remember seeing the video footage of a white woman who turned on her phone as she was driving in the car, just maybe a day or two after the footage of George Floyd became public. And she said, I've never been involved in anything like this before. And I've got to tell you, I didn't really think about issues like this at all. And if you had asked me about them, I probably would have sided against George Floyd until I saw this tape. And you could feel her emotion. You could see the anger and the pain and the disappointment, the disillusionment, if you will. Nobody has cornered the market on nobility, everybody. Nobody. We all have to grow up and go up together. Dwight?
Well, in religion, they tell you that all salvation starts with first admit that you're a sinner.
Mm-hmm.
You have to first admit that you're a sinner for salvation to start. And so once we're honest about that, then when you repent and turn away from your sinfulness. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, and that's why honesty is so important. I think as we talk about the original sin of the country and repent from them, then the country can be redeemed and made whole.
Well, I want you to speak to this.
And I really
speak to this, if you don't mind. Yeah, I have to interrupt you here because I've gotten some heat from some people who are, I would say, the easy classification is Black nationalists. I don't have a problem with that at all. My politics are that and then some. That having been said, some people have said, you want to talk about people of color. I only want to talk about Black people. I said, okay, I hear you. And you're right. Then this show is not a good fit for you. Because that's just, I'm like, there's more than Black people who've been injured here. And there's more than Black people in the world. And I promise you before the Lord, if you get around the world, you will see some Black people who do things right and some Black folks who do things wrong. You will see some white folks who do things right. You'll see some white folks who do things wrong. Indigenous people do things right, some who do them wrong. Asians who do it right, some who do it wrong. Just keep on going. This is about principle. It's not about persons. Really. Malcolm X, when he made the Hajj, which all Muslims must complete before they really, really are fully entered into the faith. It was when he got there and said, wait, this problem is a little bit deeper and the possibilities are much broader and more joyous, more fantastic than I even knew. Because I saw Muslims who were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, who were blue-black, who were all of the colors in between. And we were brothers and sisters there. And it was one of the things I love about Malcolm X, Dwight, is that he continued to grow and took us on his journey with him. He just kept on growing. He kept on going. He kept on growing. Went from telling us, as a Nation of Islam told us not to do at that time, don't vote, don't participate in this process, to looking to be supportive of Dr. King and the civil rights movement's efforts to vote, to gain our civil rights, and on and on and on. Dwight McKee, what about this sense that we should only talk about Black people?
All of us are on a human journey, working to be better people, working for our soul salvation. And I think we have to approach this. We all brothers operating in grace, falling
fallen people operating in grace, hoping, wanting to do better, to get better. And so it's not an indictment. It's a recognition that this is who, we are now. This is where we are now because of our ancestors who in many ways were more fallen than we were, operating off a belief system that they didn't quite understand, which has created a situation now which has manifested itself at this level of inequality and injustice. And so it's not a black thing, or a white thing. It's a right thing, a wrong thing, and a right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as Spike would say, our challenge is to do the right thing. But you can't do the right thing if you're not honest about what the wrong thing was. And so you can't be honest about what the wrong thing was without information, without understanding what happened. And so as we have these discussions and people bring more and more truths to the discussions, I think it helps us all become better and become freer and become more committed to trying to do the right thing. Even most Catholics have never heard of the discovery. Most Catholics didn't know what the Pope was talking about. But it's the major sin of the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm. Jewel, is that you?
Because we were
I'm still here.
Oh, okay, good. Dwight?
But also the truth has been suppressed. So we don't really know the truth, which is why it's so hard for us to get free. Jesus said that he didn't say the truth will set you free. He said, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And part of the tragedy of the American experience is we don't know the truth. We've been lied to and brought up on mythology and propaganda. And we believe that's true.
And we think that other people have been mythologized and propagandized, and we don't think that happens here. It happens here every single day. Every single day. Which is why, I have, taken, I guess, the road less traveled. Every sponsorship I'm grateful for. And I've had to individually get them one by one because I don't take the party line, because the party line just doesn't work. And oftentimes it obscures so much of the truth. We need to be able to have these discussions here. This is the only way we're going to grow. And I've known Dwight. I've known you since I was 2. We've grown up with, and it could make me cry when I think of Frank Watkins, my father's longest serving staff member, the most loyal person we've known aside from Aunt Lucille Conway Loman. I mean, just among the most loyal. I will say no one was more loyal than Frank Watkins. Would you not agree, Dwight?
And was white as Wonder Bread.
Really, no joke. Yeah, he died last year. And was absolutely white and absolutely clear on this system. I can't turn my back on him. He was my family. I can't turn my back on Gary Masoni, who put me in his arms when I was 1 year old. He and his wife, Betty, pulled my parents out of there, helped them get out the car when they stopped at McGifford House, which was a dormitory at the University of Chicago when they got to Chicago. I can't turn my back on David Wallace. Both of these are white men. Dave Wallace and my father were brothers. He named his firstborn son after my dad. He helped to name Jonathan, Congressman Jackson. He said, no, we prayed about it. And we all decided that his middle name should be Luther and Dr. King should be his godfather. There are too many good people from everywhere I've known. I can't let you go off on the Jewish community. When I see someone like Carolyn Kasdan, who we did not know in 1983, who came out of somewhere and gave us a good 25, 30 years and would not move, no matter what the controversy. And we were controversial when she got to us because we were calling for Israeli safety and Palestinian justice. And that was an absolute, that was something you just didn't do in American political life and survive. Casey Kasem, please. I have had too much experience with too many wonderful people from all of these different backgrounds and perspectives who have come together on principle. On principle. People who've united to serve humanity and to save it. And I'm going to stay right there on that. Juneteenth is an American holiday. No one is free until everyone is free. You've got to know that. Until every mouth does not know hunger, until every stomach is full, no stomach will truly be full. No one will be secure. Our First Lady, Mrs. Luther May Evans, Mrs. Clay Evans, Dwight, you know what she used to say, and you know it. You know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. You don't know where you're going. You just know where you've been, my friends. You don't know anything. You can be the richest person on earth today, and you are a moment away from poverty. You don't know. Everything we have is by God's grace. Everything. So get over yourself and let us grow together. The earth was known as Pangea. It was one supercontinent. We were separated as punishment according to biblical lore. Now let's come together. Let's do that. And let's make America great. For real. For real. And it won't be great until you do right by the indigenous people first. You must do right by them. You must. You have to do right by African Americans. You've got to speak to the broken heart of the Japanese who were interred in 1942. I heard this woman on CNN yesterday say, you know what, she's fighting for Black reparations in California. She said instead of having the guns pointed at the enemy, they had them pointed at me. I met people like her in 83 and 84 who said, run, Jesse, run, you're running for me. But I tried to spend my money in Chinatown to get food, Jewel and Dwight, when we were out of the Democratic Convention in 1984, we'd go into a restaurant and they would say, oh, are you with, in heavily accented English, are you with Jesse Jackson? Yes. So you go through the store, you go through the restaurant, you'd order your food or you get something, you get to the counter, they'd be like, oh no, money no good here. You're like, well, no, you with Jesse. You with Jesse Jackson. You're with Jesse Jackson. Because they had, when you walked into Chinatown, a big banner, welcome Jesse Jackson delegates. They weren't welcoming anybody else. They said, your money is no good here. We love him. He speaks for us. Hey. When some of the biggest foes that our campaign had were some Black people, were some members of the Jewish community, you just keep on going. No, I can't do that to people. I can't, and I won't. So let us grow together, everybody. Dwight, you want to say something? Jewel? Anybody?
I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, let me hear Jewel first, and then you, Dwight. Jewel?
Yes, I just wanted to say happy Father's Day again to your dad and all the fathers in the world. And keep us up in prayer. Keep us up in prayer because the blessings come down when the prayers go up.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Hey, love you, Jewel. Love you. Dwight, love you. What your closing thoughts, Dwight?
Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Have a real good day.
And
don't eat too much barbecue and drink too much pop.
Yeah, unlike Dwight, but who's going to do that? He's going to have that for breakfast.
Unlike me, yeah.
He's going to have red soda for breakfast. You know you are. I'm going to call Martita.
In a minute.
And I'm going to call Donnie.
In a minute.
Don't think I don't know the family, because Martita, I was in his sister's wedding. It was the highlight of my of my childhood for my former babysitter to ask. She said, "Now, Niecy, I want you to be in my wedding." I was like, "What?" I was 6. I was so excited. I had to wait a year, but it was like, "Oh, this is so great. I'm so excited." Oh, I'm gonna call her today because we're not gonna. Do you remember what the last time Uncle Mickey got married? Reverend Evans looked at him and said, "Boy, Roy, I ain't doing this no more." Dwight, we're not going to see you in the hospital because you with the fried chicken bone hanging out of one side of your mouth and a really, really syrupy piece of barbecue hanging out the other side. You come on, you better behave today. He said, "Jewel, he smells this great food and goes right to it. So you just be careful, Dwight." He starts inhaling it. Oh, yeah.
I follow my nose.
Yeah. Well, me too. But guess what? Dwight shouldn't eat it all the time, but he just keeps on going. Oh, so we love Dwight. I got to mess with him. I've got to mess with him. Oh boy. But I love everybody. And you know what, Robert? And it's Obadiah? That's right. And Laura and Jewel, hey, who's here, Dave, TJ, all of you. Have a blessed holiday. And you know what? Tomorrow, I think we're going to have to talk about affirmative action, Dwight. Hope you can make some space for us tomorrow because that decision is expected to come down this week. And it is the expectation that affirmative action will be ended. And that is going to be a heck of a thing for us. So can't wait to talk with everyone about that. Unless something else happens, all I have to do is breathe and blink my eyes, and so much happens in the world right now. So, but I love you, everybody. Cannot wait to be with you tomorrow, Lord willing, on the Santita Jackson Show. Devin, thank you for a great show. God bless you, everybody. Have a blessed Juneteenth. Thank you.
Amen.